All right, tonight is Wednesday, August 18th, 2021. It's the Fantasy Finish Line podcast, and tonight we're going to dive into quarterback controversies and draft strategies. You're going to need a new song, Dave. This is a summer song. You can't use it when the summer returns.
You're right, but it's still summer currently.
Okay. Preseason, summer, training camp, they all go together.
So I'm still good for I don't know, when does summer end? When football begins?
Either Labor Day or September 21st.
Fair enough.
Depends on how meteorological you like to be.
Not so meteorological.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So, welcome to the show, everyone, watching live or checking us out sometime in the future. I am Jason Evans, joined as always by David Biggs. That music you just heard, the musical stylings of Mr. David Biggs. Very nice, Dave. All the music you hear during the podcast now is written by Dave.
Well, cheers. And then we don't have to worry about musical royalties because I'm the one not getting paid.
Yeah, but you know that somebody is going to submit some sort of copyright claim on your music.
No, they're not.
Just to try it. Just to try the cease and desist or they get paid.
Well, I would love that.
Sure. I mean, but you're not a lawyer, so you don't want to fight that.
I can easily fight it. I have all the information that's
you have all the originals.
I welcome it. No worries.
Okay.
But we are happy
Bring it on,
to.
He says.
We're
patent trolls.
We're happy to have you guys watching today, and for the fantasy football season to have sort of begun with the preseason. And we're sitting here with
draft season starts very soon
with Hard Knocks and 2 preseason games behind us if you count the Hall of Fame game, which I do as a Steelers fan, but not many other people do.
Only Cowboys and Steelers fans have 2 preseason games behind them so far. There are more coming, I believe, starting tomorrow night, Thursday the 19th, and we've got a draft coming up on Friday, the official start of draft season, if you will. There's a couple weeks before the real season starts, maybe 3 weeks.
Yeah, for everybody, I'm sure it's draft time over the next couple weeks. If someone's in only 1 or 2 leagues, I would expect they draft either the weekend right before or maybe during the week leading up to that first Thursday game that starts the season.
Ideally, yeah.
But for those of us like Jason and myself who are in a ton of leagues, we don't have the luxury of doing only that. So a lot of you that are in 5, 6, 7, 8 or more leagues find yourself drafting all throughout August.
Tough life being in 6 fantasy leagues, let me tell you.
Yeah, well, 6 sounds like 6 sounds like fun to me. I remember at one point I was at 11 or 12, something like that.
It's a bit much, but you do what you suffer for the craft.
That's right.
So as we said earlier, we're going to go over some quarterback controversies for the majority of the show tonight. If you've got any questions for us during the show, come to the chat room on YouTube, and we'll do our best to get to them. Hopefully, in some sort of timely fashion when you ask them. But if you ask it, we will do our best to answer it eventually during the show. If you have questions for us afterwards, you can always tweet us at drinkfive. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram, and we will get the questions filtered to us, and we will respond to you eventually.
I love it when he talks social media.
Yeah. I'm so fluent in social media.
Yeah, he's all over it. So.
Yes.
Also, Dave at drinkfive.com for myself, or Jason at drinkfive.com for this guy. And look at him. He's even wearing official Drink 5 gear, which will soon have a store open in case anybody else wants this lovely polo or other assorted items or pieces of merchandise from our store. We would appreciate it because we do get a piece of the pie in that particular case.
Sure. Yeah, if anybody wants to order shirts up or whatever, we right now have the nice polo. We're looking at getting some sort of women's shirt in the pipeline, and we'll go from there. So, on to the quarterback controversies tonight. We'll start with the camp battles. So, there's a few of them that we're going to look at. Winston versus Hill. And the first one, though, is going to be Drew Lock versus Teddy Bridgewater.
Mm-hmm.
So, this was an interesting game because both of the Broncos quarterbacks looked amazing. I believe Drew Lock threw 5 of 7 for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had an 80-yard touchdown to KJ Hamler. But the Vikings sat apparently 31 players, which is like all of the starters and half of the backups, which means that, I don't know how much you can take from this. Obviously, you can only line up and play against whoever the other team is going to put against you. So kudos to the Broncos for doing well when the Vikings put nobody in against them. But again, it's very poor competition. So take all of the Broncos stuff with a grain of salt because, they didn't have to play anybody difficult this past week.
Fair.
I did like what I saw from Drew Lock in that game. That pass to KJ Hamler went 55 yards in the air. So I think his deep ball is working really well. I think that's what they want to develop with him is, have a very vertical passing game as opposed to Teddy Bridgewater, who seems to be more of a dink and dunk kind of guy. Am I right? That Bridgewater isn't really a down the field kind of passer?
I don't know. We saw him on the Vikings and then again on the Panthers, but I don't know if we've had enough of a view of him with this particular kind of offensive scheme. I'm not really sure. But like you're saying, if you feel like Drew Lock is coming out as the more aggressive and especially the more tuned to the offense quarterback on this particular squad, it makes sense that maybe they would go with him at least for this particular year. But Bridgewater has been, I don't know, would you call him more of a game managing quarterback?
Yeah, I think that's fair considering he's never thrown more than 15 touchdowns in a season. He has only 2 seasons over 3,000 yards passing. His yards per attempt is only for his career is only 7.3. So not numbers that blow you out of the water. Obviously, Drew Lock with a very small sample size is even worse than that. But I think that Drew Lock was injured last year. Now he's apparently fully healthy. Mm-hmm. So this could be a different kind of quarterback. I think that's the reason why they're still going with him, because they think that there's still something there that's yet to be uncovered from Drew Lock. So Bridgewater did go 7 for 8 for 74 yards. He was even more efficient than Lock, if you can believe it. Both quarterbacks had ratings above 140, and neither of them turned the ball over, so it's exactly what you want to see. Unfortunately, the Broncos, I think, are destined to be a bad team this year, mostly because they're in the AFC West, and they are not as good as the Chargers or the Chiefs. They're probably on the same level as the Raiders at the moment, who started Nathan Peterman the entire game, which was very strange. So I think that what you're looking at is this. If Drew Lock winds up winning the job, then it's going to bring up the value of guys like Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, and Noah Fant. If Teddy Bridgewater wins the job, then I think that it's going to benefit Melvin Gordon and possibly Royce Freeman. But right now what's interesting is that Jeudy, Sutton, Gordon, and Fant all have an ADP for them going in the 8th round for PPR leagues. So they're all sort of good value, but you have to know which one of them is going to wind up being the beneficiary of whatever the quarterback's talents are.
Yeah, the Broncos have 4 seasons, the last 4 seasons with losing records. So I definitely don't think that they're going to jump up ahead in some magnificent manner.
So yeah, I like Sutton and Jeudy to outperform their ADP in the mid-70s, and that's going to happen if Drew Lock wins the job and he stays healthy, and he can have that vertical passing offense. If Drew Lock either doesn't stay healthy or if somehow he's not good enough to beat out Teddy Bridgewater for the job, then I think that what you're going to find is, the passing game is sort of mediocre, and one guy might be the guy in a given week, but it won't be an every week kind of thing. So I think the way that Drew Lock played in the last game, he will be the starter. Now they're going to start Teddy Bridgewater in the next game.
But we have a couple more preseason matches.
Yeah, and they're going to probably play both of them for an equal amount of time for the next 2 matches. So this is a battle to keep an eye on, and then that the outcome is either going to be a passing game or more of a game manager style game for the Broncos. And I wouldn't be surprised if Drew Lock plays poorly in the next 2 games that they go with Teddy Bridgewater, because with Vic Fangio and a decent defense, like game manager may be all they need to think that they can win 8 or 9 games.
Mm-hmm.
So down in New Orleans, you've got Jameis Winston versus Taysom Hill. I, don't really care for this as a quarterback. It's a weird controversy. It's not necessarily to me which one of them is going to start. It's a controversy in that it's a new approach. It's not a brand new approach. Obviously, teams have done this in the past, but it's a newish approach to running the quarterback position. In that, like, you have Taysom Hill coming in on third downs, you have Taysom Hill coming in at the goal line. I'm guessing that that's going to wind up being what happens. Is that both these guys are going to get a considerable amount of playing time in every single game, and that Jameis Winston is going to probably be protected a little bit from the situations where he's more prone to throw interceptions, and that Taysom Hill is going to be protected from having to do 80-yard drives down the field, from having to make big throws on first and second down. So I do think that you're going to see both guys playing all year, and that's going to screw with all kinds of fantasy relevance on that team. I don't like anyone on that team. I would not want to draft even an Alvin Kamara, just because Kamara is such a big name. He's going to still be taken really early by either someone who isn't paying attention or just someone who is drafting him for the name. So I would stay away from any Saints in the draft. I don't know of anybody who's really a good value right now. And I don't think it matters who winds up at quarterback, because they're going to wind up splitting time. They may not split starts. It may be like Jameis starting most games. But Taysom Hill is going to be playing a lot. I don't think he's going to have any of the goofy tight end eligibility that he's had in the past. I don't think that they'll be on the field at the same time very often. So I think you're going to wind up with both guys being a quarterback, and therefore neither of them being very fantasy relevant, because they're going to be, vulturing each other the whole time. Perhaps in a super flex league, one of them will be relevant, or both, just because in those leagues, especially if there's 12 teams, you have to own all of the quarterbacks anyways.
Is that what you've heard so far from like beat reporters, et cetera? Was that they're just going to switch off? Because I thought one was going to win the battle.
I think that what I've heard, and not from beat reporters, is that this is what the coaches are saying. But what Sean Payton has always done is use Taysom Hill as like a guy he subs in, and he's going to be way more willing to sub him in now that Drew Brees is not the quarterback for the team.
Well, it's a new situation, but I'll agree with you that if that ends up being what's happening, it's going to weigh down some fantasy values.
But basically, the way I look at it is there's almost no way that Taysom Hill can win the starting job outright from a guy like Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston throws the ball well enough to get 5,000 yards in a season and 30 touchdowns. He's way better of a passer than Taysom Hill is, and this is a passing offense. But they're also not paying Taysom Hill to be a backup quarterback. So I firmly believe that Jameis Winston is going to be the guy who plays a bit, maybe 60% of the snaps, but then you're going to have Taysom Hill in there a lot. And I think it's going to be like a big rotation, at least to start, and if they have any kind of success, they're going to stick with it.
All right. Well, I kind of felt like there was going to be one guy winning over the other, as opposed to being like the Taysom Hill coming in for rotation with Breeze kind of thing.
Yeah.
But we'll see. If what you're saying is true, then I agree that the volatility in the fantasy players, the skill positions for that team is going to be off the charts. I do like Traquan Smith, and I think that he could stand up as a good WR2 on that team. And I tend to agree with you that at least for the first couple of weeks or several weeks, Michael Thomas isn't even going to be there, right? Because he had late surgery.
Right, yeah.
I would never shy away from Alvin Kamara, although if his ADP is too high, again, that volatility can come into play. So that's an interesting way that you brought this up.
Right now, his ADP in PPR leagues is 3.
It's crazy that you would consider not taking anyone from the Saints, being that generally they're a pretty high-powered offense.
Yes, but, for the last 10, 12 years, they've had a Hall of Fame quarterback running that offense. Mm-hmm. That is not the case anymore. So I think that's a huge question mark now. I don't like Latavius Murray as the backup. I don't like Devonta Freeman as the backup. I feel like Latavius is sort of losing his stranglehold after really bad performance from both of the backups, really. And I don't believe Alvin Kamara even played in that game.
So you're not taking Kamara. We get it. We understand.
Yeah, definitely not. And I don't even want these other guys as late-round backups. I could see a flyer on some of their faster, like lower on the depth chart guys, like a Marquez Callaway, Deontay Harris. But at the same time, they'll probably be available on waivers after week 1. So you may not even need to waste a pick on them.
All right, moving over to some injury issues or possibilities. A lot of us were talking about Carson Wentz, whether he was down or out or not. At the beginning of August, Carson Wentz had surgery on what Colts coach Frank Reich said was an old injury. So he's talking about a broken bone coming loose.
Is it an injury because Carson Wentz is getting old, or
no? A bone coming loose in his foot, which is a little bit.
It's something that had been repaired many times, and it just probably keeps happening to him.
Right. So when you find these injuries that are chronic, they continue to happen, or never got repaired correctly, it certainly puts a little distrust on that particular player. But Carson Wentz was brought there for a reason, to be the Colts starter. If we look at the timetable, he was originally given by Reich, it's 5 to 12 weeks for his full recovery. Over the past few weeks, we've seen Jacob Eason, who was a fourth-round pick in 2020, and Sam Ehlinger, which was a sixth-round pick this year, sharing first-team reps in practice, and both had a chance to showcase their talents in the Colts' first preseason game against the Panthers. Both the quarterbacks were actually pretty good, and threw for a combined 338 yards, but no touchdowns. Most of the points in that game came from the kickers, which is something that I'm sure that the coaches weren't really looking to see.
Yeah, they don't need to worry. You can test out kickers on the practice field.
Yeah. Eason had a fumble that looked preventable, and Ehlinger threw an interception directly into coverage. So no stunning performances there to start the season, but thankfully for the Colts, it looks like Wentz is already back at practice without a boot. The news coming...
A boot what?
A boot on his foot.
A little Canadian humor in there.
A boot time to start, Wentz, right?
Yes.
So looking at the news that was coming out of the practices just today, it looked like Wentz was trying to pressure himself back into that offense and start throwing passes and moving around in the pocket. Not what the Colts coaches want him to do.
Sure, if we learned anything from Hard Knocks, it's that the quarterback is going to yell at everybody if they're not allowed to play, and nobody actually wants the quarterback to play, but then everybody is also actually really upset that the quarterback is not playing.
Right.
Fun position to be in. I'd not envy that.
And according to ESPN's Chris Mortensen, I think that everything is predicting that Wentz will start for Week 1 for the Colts, which definitely returns some value to the rest of the offensive starters there. And the other great thing is that another guy with a foot injury, who's Quentin Nelson, who is protecting Wentz, will also be able to...
had basically the same injury, apparently.
Yeah, foot injury. I'm not sure it was an old bone, but something similar.
It's an old bone.
So it's a sigh of relief for all fantasy football owners in dynasty leagues or redraft leagues alike, or for people that are looking to draft some skill position players.
Yeah, as someone who drafted Jonathan Taylor in last year's dynasty draft, I was not looking forward to a lack of Quentin Nelson and Carson Wentz.
Yeah.
So this is much better.
But the big question is, will Wentz's previous inconsistencies disappear after moving from the East Coast to the Midwest? Because even though he's gone from a Philadelphia Eagle to an Indianapolis Colt, and even though he has the greater experience and track record as a quarterback, it doesn't mean that he's going to return to form as the starter that he was when he first came into the league.
Oh, absolutely.
So, remains to be seen. Let's talk about some legal issues.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Unless you've been living under a rock so far this preseason, probably a good place for social distancing, which is positive. You're at least slightly aware of the developing situation with Deshaun Watson. So he's had civil lawsuits from 22 different women relating to using massage therapy appointments as a conduit or connection to sexual harassment and or assault. Now, the latest information from his lawyer,
succinctly put,
who just had a press conference either yesterday or today about this very subject, his name is Rusty Hardin. I'm sure there's some jokes there. Is that Watson is cooperating with the FBI and having conversations about whether at least one of his accusers is committing or has committed extortion in the case. I don't want to talk too much about this, and I don't think you do either, but we can easily see where there could be multiple sides to all of these stories. I think that Jason and I both agree on is that until everything is resolved, there most likely won't be a Deshaun Watson starting as a quarterback in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know. I hear a lot of people talking about how they don't see him starting this year.
So there's possibilities to everything, but it doesn't look likely, especially. I know that Houston started talking up trades again with Watson, and that there was some rumor mill stuff going on with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
And they probably should look into trading for someone like Watson at least sometime in the future, because their quarterback is not very good.
No, not at all.
And
there I am.
And so Watson has not talked to the NFL yet, because there hasn't been a request for him to talk to the NFL.
The NFL has not asked yet.
Because the NFL doesn't have those conversations according to their rules and guidelines until any possible criminal investigation has concluded. And there currently isn't a criminal investigation, so it's going to be a while.
So they still think that they're leaving the window, the opportunity open.
Yeah, that's the point.
For there to be one.
And he hasn't been added to the commissioner's exemption list. You know, like nothing has happened negative to Watson in the NFL other than the fact that he was already cutting ties with Houston. So they're not lining up to have him be their quarterback.
I think this is going to be something where in 5 years we learn what happened. Because there's got to be something else going on that we just that we aren't privy to.
Maybe.
Because he demanded a trade and the team decided to not play ball at all. And then all of this other stuff happened after all that. Like, the timing is just too convenient for them. And it almost seems like, somebody, stopped him on the street or, like, came up to him in the parking lot and was just like, if you say that you'll play for the Texans, this is all going to go away.
Well, again, I don't really want to put my foot in.
And that's just, that's just me being a conspiracy theorist and, like, coming up with an exciting story.
It's certainly possible, and the timing is very odd.
But it feels like something weird, something is going on that we're not privy to still.
Well, he's shown up to Texas Texans practices, and mostly because he would have faced fines of up to $50,000 per day.
Oh, so he's going to practice. Is he practicing? Are they letting him do anything?
Well, he was to start, and he was even taking reps at quarterback, but over the past couple days, he hasn't been practicing. He's not going to the games. He's not going to be their quarterback.
Okay.
So Tyrod Taylor is the person getting most of the reps here. He's a veteran quarterback that most of you are familiar with. He'll be in his 11th year and has limited success previously.
Yeah, keep those lungs healthy, brother.
Well, that unfortunate set of circumstances,
so crazy,
where his lung was punctured by a team doctor who put the needle in too far.
Yeah,
that's some crazy stuff.
Dr. Brian Herbert.
So Taylor's camp performance.
Another conspiracy theory.
Taylor's camp performance so far has been considered solid, and he'll most certainly be under center for Week 1. But unfortunately for Taylor, the wide receiver that they just got was going to be a supportive cast member over there, Anthony Miller from the Bears, was carted off the field just a couple days ago with a dislocation of the right shoulder.
Oh, man.
Now, that's an injury that Bears fans will be familiar with. Now, I believe that he's had a shoulder injury while playing football 4 times, maybe more, if we go back to college. And it's likely that we'll see a ton of Brandon Cooks this year, regardless of who is at quarterback. I feel like Brandon Cooks is going to be a good PPR wide receiver, of course better with Watson, but he's the only receiver on that team of a good merit.
Oh, so I just Google Anthony Miller shoulder injury.
Yeah.
April 4th, 2019, Anthony Miller gruesomely details how bad his shoulder injury is.
Oh, my gosh.
December 31st, 2019, Anthony Miller to undergo surgery on left shoulder. May 12th, 2020, Anthony Miller rehabbing his left shoulder again. 4 days ago, Anthony Miller to undergo our MRI.
You know, we're from the Chicago area, and Anthony Miller has had a lot of promise, but he's one of those guys that just can't stay healthy, and it's unfortunate.
Oh, speaking of Bears wide receivers that had promised but couldn't stay healthy, and it's unfortunate.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin White got signed by the Saints today.
Oh, after he was dropped like a couple days ago by another team.
Yeah, I think by the Cardinals.
That's what the Saints need is Kevin White.
Yeah, well, I mean, he was on the depth chart, but when I'm talking about taking a flyer on guys, I'm not talking about Kevin White.
Yes. There is a rookie there that I think is going to be pretty good named Nico Collins. He's been impressing in camp as well. So look out for Nico and for Brandon. regardless of the
Is
quarterback
there anybody
situation.
on the Texans who you're interested in drafting?
Well, I think I just said. I think Brandon Cooks
Brandon
is a great wide receiver. Nico is a rookie who has a chance to get a whole ton of receptions in this offense as possible WR2 with Anthony Miller being injured. Kiki QT is interesting, but Anthony Miller coming back will probably put him on the bench. I don't really like
Until he injures his other shoulder.
I don't like the cavalcade of old running backs that they have.
Mark Ingram, David Johnson.
But it looks like Philip Lindsay might be the guy who is getting more reps than anybody else.
What about Rex Burkhead?
No. So
I just had to bring them all up.
Lindsay might be an interesting take on that team. But the Texans are going to have trouble this year. I think everyone knows that. It doesn't mean that they can't have fantasy relevance with a couple guys because they're going to be coming from behind all the time.
There's always someone fantasy relevant on every team. It's very true. It's hard to pick on these bad teams at the beginning of the year, but the good money would be on Brandon Cooks at the moment because he is by far the best player on the offense at the moment.
Yeah, I mean it's not just money, right? He was good last year. He'll be good this year no matter what happens. He's kind of going to end up being that guy that gets all of the targets. So the rookie quarterback that they drafted, Davis Mills, selected in the 3rd round to become a future starter in Houston, is kind of the guy that they're looking at as their future in general. But it doesn't look like from the game that he's played and the camp performance that he's someone that could step into the role above Taylor. And Jeff Driscoll, who they also have, just because they kind of wanted to have a whole big quarterback room, has already been cut from 2 teams in his 3-year career, and he doesn't look like anyone who's going to stick around. So the way that I see it, it's Taylor with Davis backing him up, Deshaun Watson probably not playing the season, and like we mentioned, Brandon Cooks being the only major fantasy relevant asset on that team. Perhaps Philip Lindsay, but a team coming from behind is not going to have a whole lot of opportunities to run the ball.
Only one worth drafting is going to be Brandon Cooks. The rest, keep an eye on the waiver wire, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let's talk about some other rookies, some guys that have a chance to start, and we can start with the Chicago Bears situation.
Sure. Like every year, there are going to be a lot of rookies that wind up starting. It was an interesting day on Saturday in the NFL. 4 different rookies got their very first taste of NFL action, if you will. So here in Chicago, we have Andy Dalton versus Justin Fields, and Justin Fields, it's kind of the consensus that he was the most impressive of the rookies on Saturday. It is preseason. It's the very first time that they were out there, but hey, when you do well, and you should hang your head on it and move forward. So Nagy and the Bears coaching staff are still hedging, and they're saying that Dalton is their starting quarterback. I think that's the right approach. There was an injury today. I couldn't get the exact... Tevin Jenkins is the left tackle. He's going to have back surgery, so that's a huge deal. They did release Charles Leno earlier in the year, who was the backup left tackle. So they're going to have a problem losing their left tackle in camp. Obviously, protection was a problem for the Bears this year. We did write this little blurb about Justin Fields before they lost their left tackle. So that's going to be a huge deal. I think that losing their left tackle makes it more likely that Andy Dalton plays more, even though perhaps Justin Fields is better equipped to have a bad line because of his scrambling ability. But you don't want a young quarterback to only rely on his legs and be running for his life the whole time in his first year. That doesn't teach him how to be a good lifelong quarterback.
Sure.
So, I understand where the Bears coaching staff are coming from when they still say that Dalton is their guy, even though it's pretty clear that Justin Fields is going to be the guy very soon. But you can't say that about him until you're absolutely right. So the big thing here is that the Bears play the Rams in week 1. And it would be a big mistake to roll out Fields against Aaron Donald, a guy who's going to catch him, a guy who's going to smash him, when you can sacrifice Andy Dalton to Aaron Donald instead. It's going to be a really tough game for the Bears to win. It'll be the first time that the Rams get to play in their new stadium with any fans at all. So they're going to be pumped up. It's going to be a huge Sunday night game to start the season. Going to be a really big deal. I think that the Bears could show well, but they're going to have Andy Dalton, so they're not going to win the game. And even with Justin Fields, I think it'd be really hard-pressed to win. Rookie quarterbacks don't win on the road in the NFL anyways, certainly not in their very first start. So we're going to see Andy Dalton sacrifice to Aaron Donald. What's nice for the Bears is that any of the next 3 games against Cincinnati, Cleveland, or Detroit have a much better chance for Justin Fields to find some success. So he could still be starting before the month of September is over. But for right now, I do believe you're going to see Andy Dalton as the starter. I don't think Andy Dalton starts more than 4 or 5 games unless he's 4-0 or 5-0. Then, he'll keep playing. And I just listed a bunch of easy games that they're going to have. So it's not out of the realm of the possibility that he's 4-0 or 3-1, provided he survives the first game.
I happen to like Andy Dalton still. I think that he's, still a good veteran quarterback. That he was number 31 in 2020 in fantasy points, even though he only played 11 games. And he's still riding that Andy Dalton line as far as I'm concerned. He did a decent job with the Cowboys. I think with
since he's a starter, I would agree that he's still an Andy Dalton line.
So I don't think they're putting in Fields unless there's an injury or he loses the games.
Right.
But I do agree with you that at some point this year you will see Fields. I'm not sure if it'll be in 4 games, but Andy Dalton's not a spring chicken. So.
Right. I mean, if Andy Dalton looks absolutely like garbage in the first game, and it's not just because of a bad offensive line, then it's going to accelerate the process. But if he acquits himself well and he wins 2 or 3 of those next games, Justin Fields will play, but not till like November. And now I think in Superflex leagues, you got to own Justin Fields because his floor is going to be very high. So I think he still needs to be drafted in Superflex leagues.
Yeah, I don't think you'll find him on the waiver wire, along with a lot of these other guys that we're going to mention as well.
Correct.
Because it's likely that they play at some point, depending on the situations with the incumbent starters.
All right, well, you want to move over to San Francisco?
Yeah, so 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan has said throughout the offseason, after selecting Trey Lance, who was their 3rd overall pick in this year's rookie draft, that Lance will have a, in quotes, tough time becoming the starter this year. Now, I think that's just coach speak, like it always is. Speak is...
Coaches open their mouth. It's coach speak.
It's omnipresent during this time, especially because they don't want to piss off those people that are already on their team. And when you look at Garoppolo, he's going to make over $24 million this year as a quarterback of the 49ers. They already signed him. He's already going to make that money.
Right.
And
he's
so
been paid that money probably.
They had an opportunity earlier this spring to release him from their team. They did not do that. What that means to me is that Garoppolo will probably be the quarterback for quite a while there, depending on his performance. Let's look at the details. So Garoppolo was the quarterback just 2 seasons ago when the 49ers made it all the way to the Super Bowl. They did lose to the Chiefs 31-20. Garoppolo had questionable play. At that time, he was still a newer quarterback that had been traded from the Patriots to the 49ers, and I think there was a season full of injuries, etc. But Lance, on the other hand, has been flashing highlights in practice. It looks like he's the guy, at least in the upside way, that they were looking for. He had an 80-yard touchdown play just this past weekend to wide receiver Trent Sherfield in the preseason game. But when we talk about these great plays that these rookies made, a lot of times they are going up against not so great players.
Right. Let's remember preseason game.
Yeah. So again, like we always say with rookies, important to take it with a grain of salt. It's certainly possible that someone is just going to take off and keep running forever. But when you're playing in the actual NFL against players that are not just sitting because those coaches know that they're going to kick some ass during the game, it's going to be a different story. So Lance continues to show his upside in those practices, but Garoppolo is far better at situational football. According to the beat reporters that are on the sidelines all day during practices, they think that Garoppolo has impressed in all of those circumstances that you need in those 2-minute drills, game-winning, come-from-behind sort of situations. And those are the ones that Trey Lance didn't have. He played in college at North Dakota State. He blew out teams almost every single game. And so he's not familiar with being down by 10 in the fourth quarter with 4 minutes left.
Right, you only have one timeout left.
Yeah, so he's going to have to learn, and I think it's going to take longer than the preseason to learn that stuff. I know the 49ers traded up to get Lance, traded 3 first-round picks. left them without a first-round selection until 2024. But my money is still on Garoppolo playing for his life, being the quarterback this year. And the 49ers it's not unlikely that they get pretty far in the playoffs with Jimmy G, and that they simply, turn away from Jimmy next year and turn to Trey Lance. However, we have seen Garoppolo be out for a whole season, like we talked about with Dalton. If Jimmy G goes out there and loses 4 games in a row, if he gets injured, Trey Lance is going to be their guy. But these teams that mortgage their future for a rookie quarterback don't want to put them in immediately.
I agree. I think that it's best to let them sit for a year. Patrick Mahomes sat, Aaron Rodgers sat.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys who are all-time greats, they sat for a while before they played.
If they can, it would be great if he had a season.
Obviously, Peyton Manning played in his first season.
Yeah.
So it's not like you have to sit.
No.
But, most of these guys aren't Peyton Manning. So I agree with you. I think Garoppolo will wind up being the quarterback for the whole season there.
If he can, I think he will.
Yes. It's going to be his job to lose.
Yeah.
Whether it's through health or performance, it'll be up to him.
Well, his job's actually to win, but he might not carry through on that.
His job is to complete passes.
Well, he has a great defense.
The win may not come down to his, to him.
He's got a lot of good players on that offense and defense to carry him, so he only needs to be above the Andy Dalton line to keep his job.
I agree.
Yeah. And
at $24 million a year, you better be above the Andy Dalton line.
You should be, yeah.
And they only have him under contract for one more year, and the dead cap for next year is only $1.4 million. So he is an easy cut for next year if it comes to it.
Yeah, that's my point. I think that Trey Lance becomes the quarterback of the future in San Francisco in 2022, unless something happens this year that forces the hand to put Trey Lance there. But based on all the capital that they had to spend to get him, he's clearly their guy for the future.
Correct.
But it would be so great, as it always is, like we just talked about, to have that guy behind someone who's more of a veteran.
Yeah, so. And part of the idea is we're going to be a good team. Our first-round picks aren't going to be worth as much.
Yeah.
So that's why they were able, they probably didn't hesitate so much to trade them up.
That's true.
To get up there.
Another matchup, Cam Newton versus Mac Jones. So when asked about whether he was going to start in Week 1 for the Patriots at a press conference this past Monday, he was given the question. Cam Newton said, "Y'all sitting up here asking silly questions to me, and I'm looking at y'all with the same thing. I don't know what y'all want me to say. You know that. He hasn't said that. So for you to just ask the question, it is what it is.
You just need a goofy hat, and you really got the Cam Newton down.
Thanks. I was just channeling a little Cam there. It's clear from Cam, from Belichick, from the beat reporters, from the press conferences, that there is no QB1 spot that is called out and named so far for the Patriots. Mm-hmm. They drafted Mac Jones as the 15th overall pick. He could easily slot in Mac Jones as the quarterback this year with Cam Newton's performance last year, which was not that great. The stats after the first preseason game, Newton went 4 for 7 for 49 yards, and Jones went 13 for 19 for 87 yards. We're not getting a lot out of that.
Yeah.
Jones had more playing time. He'll probably continue to have more playing time because they want to see what he can do. But in practice, they had a scrimmage session just yesterday with the Eagles, right? Newton went 13 for 15, and Jones went 13 for 14. Now, this is a good battle. It's actually shaping up to be one of the best battles that I've seen.
Yeah, I believe they play tomorrow night. So, kind of an island game.
Yeah, so check that out. It's going to be interesting. Notably, one of the...
did we just tell people that preseason is going to be interesting?
I like preseason.
Nobody's going to believe us.
I like the first half of preseason games.
I like the idea of preseason games.
There's no reason to watch the last half.
There's no reason to actually watch the games.
Again, I disagree.
I know. I'm joking.
Especially for you in 2 dynasty leagues. You got to do it.
I kid.
Yes.
It's just brutal to watch it.
Little dog, little joke. I know. So, notably, the Eagles kept calling Cam the checkdown king. Specifically, one of the, I think the secondary from the Eagles was sort of razzing him throughout the practice, and it was getting to him. We know we've seen Cam crying on the sidelines. One of the reasons why Cam Newton is not the guy that he used to be is because psychologically stuff has gotten to him. And I think that's still happening. And being, Bill Belichick's quarterback cannot be helping him.
Yeah, I don't know that Bill Belichick is going to be the kind of guy to coach him up psychologically.
Right, but I think
maybe. I mean, I don't know. Maybe
if we look at Belichick historically, it's more likely that Cam will be the one lining up to start on September 12th against the Dolphins.
I would not be surprised if Bill Belichick was like, well, mental health is important, and you need to take some U time, Cam.
Yeah. Belichick tends to favor the veterans.
Whatever will help him win, I think, is what he would do.
Well, one thing he tends to do is not start the rookies, not
correct.
It's more likely that Cam is the starter there, but I think that Cam has such little wiggle room that he probably can't move his arm out from under his chest. He's spelunking right now.
That is not much wiggle room at all.
He's cave diving. He's in a bad position. So interestingly, there are news reports out of camp, and this will camp, and this will probably harken back to what you were talking about with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston, that Bill Belichick has been slotting either of them in each other's series for like small, just one play things. And it's possible that maybe they bring in Mac Jones, or maybe Mac Jones has a series and they bring in Cam Newton on the goal line. Because, one of the good things about Cam, for example, is that he has historically had pretty good red zone figures because no one can really defend against him.
Right.
They have to stack the box because he'll run, and then he can just toss it to a tight end.
Yeah.
Now he's got 2 tight ends.
Not on the field at the moment.
0 at the moment.
Yes.
Maybe 2 in theory, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this one's still anyone's game based on preseason performance, but I wouldn't put it past Belichick to sneak those guys in, during a live game.
Yeah.
Not as much necessarily as happens in the Saints.
Definitely not as much. So back in the 70s, I believe, a couple of famous guys tried this. They tried the rotating quarterback, the relief quarterback.
I'm not sure.
A coach named Tom Landry and a quarterback named Roger Staubach.
I'm not sure the 70s has
tried
any
doing that.
bearing on
But what I'm
modern
saying
football.
is, one of the best quarterbacks in history, one of the most well-regarded coaches in history, Bill Belichick definitely would be very aware of this. They tried the whole rotate the quarterback thing back then.
Yeah.
It didn't work to the tune that, nobody tried it again for 30 years. Until really now, persistently anyways.
No,
I'm sure that people have swapped. We saw Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton swap back and forth a little bit, but nobody's really persisted in doing it game after game, until Sean Payton.
I totally get it, but 50 years ago.
Yeah, it is almost 50 years ago now. So, yeah, but what I'm saying is that Belichick remembers.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong about that. Yeah, he certainly does.
So let's touch on a few more rookies. According to the notes, it's Trevor Lawrence.
Belichick.
So we'll call him Trevor. How about that? Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson, will they be starting right away? So Trevor Lawrence, he started the first preseason game for the Jaguars. His very first play was a sack. Welcome to the NFL, you rookie. In his defense, Gardner Minshew was also sacked on the first drop back of the game.
You're not trying to get Minshew to start over.
I am not. I'm just saying that, look, it's probably a bad offensive line, and they played the Browns, and the Browns have improved on defense this year.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty clear that Urban Meyer is going to start Lawrence right away, given the fact that Gardner Minshew is the best quarterback in the rest of the group.
Yep.
And Gardner Minshew is not a choice of Urban Meyer in any way, shape, or form.
Nope.
So, what you're going to see is growing pains for the Jaguars offense. They're not going to be very good in the first quarter of the season, is my prediction. It's going to be a lot of just kind of learning what's going on. This is going to be another rebuilding season for the Jaguars. I don't think they're going to win only one game like last year. I think they could win 5 or 6 games. And Lawrence is definitely going to be relevant in Superflex leagues. His ADP right now is, I believe, quarterback 14. So he's definitely going to be used, but you may not want to rely on him being the starter right away. You might want to pair him with a Jimmy Garoppolo or an Andy Dalton, or someone who will be starting at the beginning of the year, even a Cam Newton. And those are guys who you can get even after you draft Trevor Lawrence. So if you are in a Superflex league and you want Trevor Lawrence on your team, make sure you have a guy who you're comfortable with starting with in the first month of the season until Trevor Lawrence really starts to settle in.
Mm-hmm.
So the Jaguars do have a good schedule in September. They play the Texans and the Bengals in the first month of the season, so that could help out Trevor Lawrence in getting used to everything and getting Mr. Etienne alongside him.
I think you've mentioned the Bengals a couple times as like an easy team to beat. I'm not sure they're going to be an easy team to beat this year.
Last podcast I talked up how much I like the Bengals to be a good team, and then for 2 weeks it was just stories from camp about how terrible the Bengals were.
It's stories from camp,
And so I don't know what to believe, but I feel like the Bengals have focused a lot on their offense, and their defense is still not going to be that great.
Yeah.
And what I'm looking at today is, guys playing against the Bengals defense in order to, have a below average competition to sort of get them into the flow of the NFL.
Well, we don't care if a team loses or wins. We just want...
I do not care unless I bet on them.
We just want...
Unless I got the Browns +7.
We just want the players that we have selected to score more fantasy points.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Then my opponent.
Well, then, all right. I hear you. And if the Bengals have a good offense, well, that's just more chucking that Trevor Lawrence has to do.
Look, give me all the offense and none of the defense, and there will be more points for everybody.
No defense anymore. We're taking it away in the NFL, yeah.
Yes, we're going to remove it from fantasy football. So, Zach Wilson, another rookie for the Jets. He started the first preseason game as well. It's really hard for me to think that Mike White or James Morgan, who are those guys again, are going to be starting over him when week 1 rolls around. So Zach Wilson led a field goal drive and then a turnover on downs. He played for just over a quarter, just 2 drives. He was 6 of 9 for 63 yards. Truly uninspiring. So Wilson's ADP is quarterback 27. For depth, he will be taken at the end of Superflex drafts. Obviously, as we keep saying, all the quarterbacks are going to be owned in those kind of drafts. But I don't like how this looks for the rest of the Jets' fantasy players. So, the relevant names on the team, Corey Davis, Tevin Coleman, Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder, Elijah Moore. I don't look forward to drafting any of those guys. I don't want any of them on my team. I think that there'll be people who we pay attention to on the waiver wire for sure. Because 1 or 2 of them are going to be relevant, just like we've said about the Texans and all the other bad teams we're talking about tonight.
I think you're underestimating how many times the Jets are going to have to throw the ball to Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder and Elijah Moore.
That's great, but I mean, I'm not looking forward to drafting them is what I'm saying. I'll pay attention to them as waiver picks, but I have no idea. This team could be okay.
I don't see them being on the waiver wire, but I know what you're saying.
And this team could be terrible.
There are also there's some validity to marking those players that you don't want. And whether you're right or wrong, you can't take everyone, and you don't want to take everyone in a draft.
True.
So if you don't like their situation, and it's not, I'm not aghast at you because you don't
I think the Jets are going to be bad.
You don't like the Jets situation with a new quarterback and a new running back and new wide receivers and new coaching staff.
Sure.
I get it. I think they'll surprise. But even if they surprise, they may still be in the bottom quarter of surprise. Yeah. So I get it.
The bottom quarter of surprise.
Yeah. they're not world beaters.
So perhaps if they show well in the next few preseason games, they could move up the ADP or at least move on to the ADP radar.
Imagine the Jets hype. Yeah.
Yes, like 3 guys. Like one of them is the guy who wears the fireman's outfit at the games.
That's right. Corey Davis in an all leopard onesie, catching touchdowns with one hand. I can't wait till the wide receivers come out of college in 5 years catching footballs with 0 hands. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, yeah. Did you see the play in the CFL? The guy who caught the ball without catching it? So it was a throw over the middle.
Did you just ask me if I saw a CFL thing?
It was a viral highlight. Throw over the middle, and the receiver is not looking.
Yeah.
But the ball just landed tucked into his arm.
Well, all right.
I mean, the quarterback couldn't have placed it any better. They always say that, but literally no quarterback has ever placed the ball so well as just throwing it so the guy doesn't even have to catch it. And he scored a touchdown on the play.
All right, I'll have to check it out.
Yes.
I can break my rule and watch one CFL.
We'll tweet that one out. So a couple of guys who were on the radar for, people are asking about this, right? Players who don't want to get vaccinated. The 2 that came to mind, I don't know if they're the only 2, are Kirk Cousins and Lamar Jackson, who have both spoken out about the fact that they don't want to be vaccinated. So, is it a hot button issue? Is it a no-brainer?
They are not, by the way, the only people in the NFL. There's so many of them.
But as far as, like, starting quarterbacks who are going to be drafted in fantasy leagues, these are the two that stuck out to me. Congratulations, by the way, to the Atlanta Falcons, who are 100% vaccinated. I support that. So, I don't understand why guys are okay with having their bodies, put in danger and get concussions, but don't want shots. Anyways,
well, it's not mandatory in the NFL.
It is not.
So they don't have to.
Correct. So I think I would have, regardless of the COVID situation, avoided most of the Vikings and the Ravens anyways, just because I'm not a big fan of either team at the moment.
Well, Lamar was number 4 overall quarterback fantasy points last year.
Okay, there's a few players on each team that are interesting to me, like a Mark Andrews or like Justin Jefferson.
And Kirk Cousins was number 11 overall quarterback fantasy points. So it's not like these are the Jets here.
But with the way that the league has set up its rules this year, it is basically a strategic advantage for you to have your vaccine, and these guys are refusing to go along with that advantage. So the fact that they're far more likely to spend a few weeks away from the field because they get sick or because they're close to someone who got sick, that's something that I don't want to deal with. It's something that I want to leave in 2020 that we had to deal with all last year in fantasy football. So I don't think that I will be drafting, Kirk Cousins or Lamar Jackson.
So I don't care.
Because there's an extra dimension of, possibly not playing.
I have no stock in whether someone wants to get vaccinated or not. It's not mandatory, so they don't have to. And right. I don't like to stretch out these kinds of conversations anyway. However, why don't you go into more detail about the NFL's new policy, for example, where if a team is unable to play, or if a team has too many people that are on the COVID list, they just forfeit the game, right?
Okay, yeah.
So that's where I can understand where maybe this is more of a strategic thing when drafting.
So the NFL has told teams
you don't want to be on the wrong side.
We do not anticipate adding a 19th week.
Big news from the league office today.
You got to mute those tabs, my friend.
Yep. I got it covered. It took so long to load that I thought I was safe. Okay, so basically what they've said is that players on both teams will not be paid for a lost contest. The team responsible for the canceled game due to unvaccinated players will cover financial losses and be subject to potential discipline from the commissioner's office. So, if a team has players who decide not to be vaccinated, and then those players in turn become infected to the point where they have to cancel the game, then it is an automatic loss for that team.
Right, and that's a bad thing for the organization, for the player, for the team,
right.
etc.
And the players on that team will not get paid, and that team will be financially responsible for essentially paying the winning team.
But unless I'm missing something, there's not like some document somewhere that says these are the players that have been vaccinated and these are the players that have not.
I'm sure that the NFL has that, but
we're not privy to that.
We're not privy to that. We're only privy to the people who have either been asked and answered it or have chosen to speak out about it in the first place.
Sure. Well, I don't want to make it a personal thing. In fact, I don't have a problem with playing Kirk Cousins or Lamar Jackson or anybody. But I think what Jason's point is, and it makes sense, is that they may be slightly more likely to be missing games. And that's not our intention as fantasy football team managers, to have any players that miss games.
Right. And as we found last year, it could be some serious last-minute shit that, you're not privy to it until Friday night, Saturday night, and then all of a sudden you're scrambling to fill in for them.
That's true.
That was a headache last year, even though it didn't happen very often, or when the games got postponed or whatever. I don't want to deal with any of that. So I will just be avoiding the Kirk Cousins, Lamar Jackson sort of orbit this time around.
The orbit around Kirk Cousins.
The plexiglass container that holds Kirk Cousins.
Well, we have very little info about that stuff. Although to say that that most teams have encouraged their players to get vaccinated because that's simply good for their likelihood of having the ability to fill a full roster.
Sure. From a fantasy perspective, being vaccinated is a positive thing.
But again, there's no tags that we have for those players.
Right, we don't know who's who. I mean, honestly, the only players I know about are those two and Cole Beasley.
There's a lot of them.
I'm sure that there's a lot, and if you did a lot of... I'm sure someone somewhere on Reddit has already compiled this list.
It can't be...
But you don't have any way of knowing for sure if it's right.
We are not making any lists here at Drink 5. Okay? Not happening, Jay. Not happening.
So, I do believe like players are also allowed a much larger amount of freedom when they're on the road if they've been vaccinated. Like they can pretty much just return to normal if you've been vaccinated, and if you're not, then you have all these restrictions and you have to undergo all these testing.
All right, well let's move on from this.
So it's a distraction on top of a risk that you're not going to play.
You know, we had a season last year, and we'll certainly have a season this year with even less people being out. So it's good news. Good news.
That's true.
To fantasy football with us.
To fantasy football with you.
Ooh, I need some more. So these beers are from Odell Brewery and
Odell Brewery Jr.
If only Odell had a brewery. Maybe he does.
So it's good behavior, and that's interesting. Crushable IPA. I don't know if the camera's getting that, but it's a good can there. All good things in balance.
That's right.
Only 110 calories. You only see beers bragging about it when it's low calories. There's no like milk stouts with extra sugar that are like 380 calories for a 12-ounce beer.
You mean like the thick burger from Hardee's? You want a beer to be like, our beer is 460 calories, and we're proud of that.
Sure, I want one. One just to be like, this is a Fat Boy IPA.
You know, maybe that's a good idea. We could do some kind of bacon double imperial stout. It'll be great.
Oh, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, well.
I mean, not like in August, but talk to me in November.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing when we get out of the summer season when we talk about beers. Right now, we're drinking some pretty light ones, but delicious. Thank you, Odell Brewery. We're going to talk about draft strategies here, and I have a couple that I'm highlighting, just a basic theory and some conversation about it. So what I'd like to do is just talk about the theory and then open it up for a short discussion. We don't have too long, but there's a couple things to talk about. 0 running back, 0 quarterback, drafting a tight end or a quarterback high, which is something that not most people do.
Right.
And then best available strategy. There are a lot of other ones as well. Value over replacement player.
There's obviously crossover with all these.
Yeah, you don't have to follow just one specific theory all the way.
If you go 0 RB, you may do that because you're taking a quarterback high.
Yeah. So the 0 running back theory is that quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends that are ranked higher in a given year show less volatility than their counterparts at running back due to injury. The fact that teams could have running backs by commission or by committee, not by commission. They get commission based on how many touchdowns they've gotten. Le'Veon Bell would have loved that. Yeah. There is some discussion as to whether this strategy means not drafting a running back till the mid rounds, like we're talking about 5, 6, 7, or if it means selecting top guys at other skill positions for the first 3 or 4 rounds. And only then opening up the door to selecting your first running back. What I mean by that is, when do you take your first running back? Do you take him at 9, 10, 11? Do you take him at 5, 6, 7? The whole point of 0 running back is that you're not taking one in the top couple rounds. And so, for example, you could be comfortable with drafting Trey Sermon and Damian Harris this year, the running backs for the Patriots and the 49ers.
I'm sorry, Dave. No one should ever be comfortable drafting and trying to start a Patriots running back. No one's ever been comfortable doing it in the past.
Not with Ramondre running 10 times for 120 yards in the preseason. He
fumbled too,
but drafting those guys between rounds 8 and 10, you could take all the wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends above that, and then just start taking running backs there.
Yeah.
We've seen people have success with this strategy before. So what is your opinion on 0 running back? Is it something that might be good this particular year? Because it is a year-by-year kind of case by case.
I've always been intrigued by this and never...
Have you never actually done it?
I have done it. I mean, for real drafts, I have probably done we've played for 10 years, and I've done more than 50, less than 100, like real drafts. I've probably done this 5 times total, and I would say that it's really tough to keep the discipline of just waiting on a running back and waiting on a running back.
But what you have to do is not only just take 2 guys, but take like 6 guys.
Right.
Because you just need upside guys, because 1 or 2 of them will probably end up getting more
And a few times this has paid off, and a few times it really hasn't.
Yeah.
So where I would execute a strategy like this is generally going to be if I am drafting in the middle of the first round. Like if my first pick is in the middle of the round. Because, you've got running backs are the first 6 ADP slots, and then you've got Devontae Adams at WR7, Kelsey at tight end 1 for 8. So if you're in that area where 5 or 6 running backs are off the board, you're not a huge fan of like Saquon Barkley, or you don't want to reach for Nick Chubb, then this is where you start with that 0 running back strategy. Mm-hmm. If you're first overall, you're not going to draft 0 running backs because you're going to take Christian McCaffrey unless you're in a super flex league.
You don't have to, but you would trade that pick otherwise because that's who's going to be taken.
Yeah, but I don't know that. I mean, some leagues just don't even allow us trading.
Well, those are dumb leagues.
Well, for redraft leagues, to keep it simple, I think it's not completely unreasonable.
Well, I don't think we're into very simple fantasy conversations, but
that's true.
To your point, if you have,
I understand why some leagues don't do it.
If you have a 12-team league and you're drafting number 1 in a single quarterback PPR league, Christian McCaffrey is the first guy taken.
Yeah, based on his history, I don't see why you could take anybody else.
Yeah, so that's good advice.
Unlike past years, there isn't really anybody who I really want at number 1.
But really want them or not, if you
because
look
his
quarterback
quarterback is Sam Darnold, and I don't know what to do with that.
I bet Sam Darnold's better than we think.
I hope so.
He was on a bad team with a bad coach.
Yeah.
But he sees ghosts though. But if you
but only in New York. With Belichick.
If you take the advice that you just gave, for example, then that makes sense because what you want in a running back is one of the guys that is going to have the most amount of carries, is going to have 250 plus touches in the season, and there's only a limited amount of those guys. So if they're all going, or if you're going to have to pick at the end of a run,
really everyone at the top, I would say, except for Kamara, are health-wise, given good health, they're a lock for 250.
You just don't like Kamara. I don't necessarily agree with you.
I just don't like relying on Kamara.
He's a badass, though.
I know, but he has a floor that's like 3 points. For a guy that good, like a floor of 3 points is really disappointing.
I don't think that team's going to allow that to occur.
No, he literally, like with Drew Brees, like he would have games where he scored like 3 points.
Okay, well, regardless of that, to your point, if you're drafting in the mid to late first round, you may want to consider the possibility of a 0 running back strategy, because then you could either take a high-end quarterback or quarterback and tight end, or you could just draft really good wide receivers and then let the upside guys fall to you later, which is really the whole point of the strategy.
Yeah.
But you need to be, again, as you said, you need to be a little brave and not, fall to the third round and pick a running back. Don't
just reach for a running back in the third round because you don't have one.
You have to wait till later. Yeah.
Okay. So last year is drinkfive full PPR or half PPR now? I think we're half PPR now. In a half PPR league, his floor was 5.7 points. And everybody loves him because he has games like in week 16 where he put up 54 points and he won a lot of people championships.
Are you still talking about Kamara?
Yeah.
You're against Kamara. I get it. It's fine. But Alvin Kamara was the number 2 running back last year.
I understand.
So you can't really argue with that statistic.
I'm just saying I don't like the volatility that comes from him.
Well, he averages 19.7 points per game. So
I know, but his floor is very low.
Were you a Kamara owner?
No, I don't. I don't think I've ever had him on a team.
All right. Well, there's no Alvin Kamara for Jason. That's fine.
The peanut gallery really likes Alvin Kamara.
Let's move on to 0 quarterbacks. So the theory behind that is that there are outliers most years, but in general, the difference between the number 2 and 10 quarterbacks being drafted in a league is not necessarily worth drafting a top 5 guy with the hopes that he will end the season at 1 or 2. In 2020, if we look at fantasy points scored, Josh Allen scored the most fantasy points with 405.06, an average of 25.32 per game.
Yep.
But the difference between Kyler Murray, who is number 2, and Lamar Jackson, who is number 10, was only 2 points per game, less than that actually.
Yeah.
So 390 to 341. If you look at the other skill position players from last year, there's a higher variance between that number 2 and 10 of any other position than quarterback. It is the least variable position between those players.
Correct.
So unless you can choose the top 1 or 2 guys, it's not worth taking them high up in a draft.
And even then, like, the top guy was only 3 points a game better than Lamar Jackson.
Yes, but
so it's not as if it's still not a huge advantage in my opinion.
But that's the whole point.
This is all for one quarterback league.
If you're playing in a single quarterback league with 10 to 12 players, maybe even 14, there's still going to be some guys on the waiver wire, even if everybody owns 2 guys.
And what's interesting is in a Superflex, all of the stats we just gave you make the opposite true. Make them incredibly valuable right away.
Yeah.
Because you can start 2 of them, and the top 10 are all so great, they all have to go almost right away, and, you get 12 quarterbacks drafted in the first 2 rounds.
Sure. And then we look at if you have 20 guys taken, after that, everyone has 2 quarterbacks in a 12-team Superflex league, then everybody else is either not playing all the games that year or not having a very high points per game average, or both.
Right.
And so that's obviously not what you want.
Yep.
So
I strongly endorse this strategy in a single quarterback league. I do it almost every time.
So if you like a particular guy for a particular reason, you're welcome to grab him. But statistically, there's no reason to do so.
Correct. In fact, you're probably reaching in almost every case.
Drafting a tight end or a quarterback high. The theory of that is that all fantasy players have different ideas how drafts should be handled, but sometimes there's something to be said for going and getting your dude. This year, for example, the top 3 quarterbacks for draft value, according to rankings of Fantasy Pros right now, are Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Kyler Murray. And the top 3 tight ends for draft value are Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, and George Kittle. Now, because of the positional scarcity we just talked about with quarterbacks is also true of tight ends, but more true of tight ends. It makes some amount of sense to grab one of those guys if you think that they might carry you through the season as the top guy. Tight ends, for example, you have 3 guys up here, a couple guys below, and then just everyone else is very low as far as how many points they're getting over the course of the season. If you miss on one of those guys, that 1 or 2 guy that you want, and this applies more towards tight ends than quarterbacks based on our previous conversation.
Yeah.
It's statistically better just to wait for the mid to late rounds when that value proposition for selecting players at the other skill positions, running back and wide receiver, that you'll be playing more of each week is higher. But I will say this. You should not punt at the tight end position. You should not wait until all of the mid and late tight ends are gone too, because then you'll be left with no one at all. So you don't, if you miss on 1, 2, or 3 at tight end, my advice is please take someone who is like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Right. Don't just take the 4 because you've tried it.
And don't take 15
Especially
or 16 or 17.
I'm glad you asked, Dave, about Kyle Pitts. So if you guys go to our website, you're going to see that we have the rookie report fact sheets out for all but the wide receivers. Wide receivers are coming later this week. We've got running backs, tight ends, and quarterbacks. So Sean pulled up this excellent stat about the tight ends. So the average TE4 in the past 5 seasons has scored 195.6 PPR points. Only 2 rookie tight ends have ever scored more PPR points than that. Most recently, Keith Jackson in 1988. So Kyle Pitts is currently the tight end 4 in redraft leagues. So what Sean's getting at, what it means is that, as you might expect, and I'm reading from the article now, any rookie tight end might as well just be called the Kyle Pitts article, right? This whole article is about Kyle Pitts. So the best rookie tight end season is what you're going to need out of Kyle Pitts in order to make it worth drafting for him. And I'm talking like the best season in the last 30 years. So it's possible, but his
How many
draft
times?
status is literally his ceiling at the moment.
How many times have we talked about this? Like, Kyle Pitts is great, sure, but he's not going to fill his cup for a couple of years.
He's being drafted as if he will reach his ceiling.
Unless you're in a dynasty league, don't take Kyle Pitts as a number 3 tight end.
Very true.
Some people are drafting him as like a number 1 or 2. You want those players in your league. You want the hype lords. You want those guys.
Yeah.
Because they're going to take these players that you don't need to take. You're right. Kyle Pitts could live up to his expectations, but the statistical truth is that it won't happen.
True. Very true.
Best available. So the theory here is using your own rankings or rankings from an outside source like drinkfive or anybody from Fantasy Pros or even the ECR there, which is the expert consensus ranking. Only drafting the top player available at all times. Anything else would be uncivilized.
I agree. This is what I do most, is best available, because I feel it's the most adaptable to whatever's going on in the draft.
So this Grey Poupon theory is one that a lot of GMs in the NFL utilize. Why waste the opportunity to draft a more talented player that has better value just because you have a need at a different position or you don't like that player for various reasons, or the team or the coaching staff? An advanced technique here to add on to that is to utilize tiers in your rankings.
Yes.
Because you may not want to draft the next guy in the overall rankings. If you have tiered each individual skill position, then you can look over and say, well, since these guys are all below in a tier 3 or 4, there's still one wide receiver left in a tier 2.
Sure.
I should probably take him instead. So it's not really a need, but it's ranking someone higher in the tiers that they exist within their own position.
It's using the value of a player as the deciding factor, rather than saying I have this position open on my team still, or something, or just matching up with whatever the sheet tells you to take next.
Yes, and this is super subjective, right? And you may need to ignore positions depending on where the chips fall. Now, when I asked Jason, since you said you utilize this strategy often, do you find yourself not drafting then like a tight end, or not drafting a last wide receiver until you regret it? Or are you able to utilize trading within the league and all the other options you have available to you to counter effect any of that negativity that could have happened?
I certainly will occasionally, especially in a Superflex league, go ahead and pick up that fourth starting quarterback, because I know that I'll be able to trade them away. So I'm not afraid to draft a position that I'm already strong at just because there's good value there, or just because I have too much of it on my team. I'll go ahead and take that because I know either I'm going to get injured or someone else is going to have an injury, and they're going to need one of those players.
Yeah, the main problem with the whole best available strategy is best available according to whom. Your rankings that you're using are either your own or someone else's, but not everyone agrees with them.
Right.
And certainly most people don't. And so you may draft the best available team, but you may find that no one wants your scrap players that you just picked up.
And some things that we have always recommended year after year is that you familiarize yourself with the main rankings, the ESPN rankings, the Yahoo rankings, whatever people in your league use year after year. Familiarize yourself with that. Find out where the differences are in those rankings. Maybe and one they've got a guy, ESPN's got a guy at 70 that Yahoo's got at 40, right? So if everybody's using ESPN, you know that you can wait a little bit longer to pick up that player.
Yeah, and honestly, the best strategy, if you have the available time and resources to do so, would be to set up a spreadsheet that has all of them, or to bring several of them to your draft, because you know there's going to be people that have ESPN rankings or Yahoo rankings or Fantasy Pros ECR rankings.
Yep.
And if you have those and you're marking them all off during the draft, then you know what guys are going to be selected next.
Yes.
Unless you're in a team, in a league with all experts and they have their own individual rankings. But that's not very often that you come across that.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, those are, I think, the main ones. I think the other thing that, I think we discussed most of what we need to for today anyway. And you can always look for draft strategies online if you want to. I really do like the value over replacement player strategy, but it gets more complicated. There's an algorithm there. You have to figure it out based on the scarcity of the players and the point projected per the scoring rules for the league that you're in.
Sure.
But if you're able to do that, that's what you need to do, really. Draft someone that gives you a higher value than anyone else that you can draft at that moment. Now, if you want to just go with your gut value, you need that third wide receiver, and if you don't get him now, you're going to regret it forever. Then do it. But statistically, it's more important to take someone that will have been taken in the next couple spots.
Right. I mean, to go back to the tiers for a minute, you're absolutely right when you say, like, okay, there's one guy left at the end of tier 2, and then I've got at this other position all of tiers 3 and 4.
Yeah.
If you skip taking the end of tier 2 wide receiver in favor of a tier 3 running back, well, by the time you come around again, there may still be tier 3 running backs available. And as we've seen, like, inside of tiers, the point projections shouldn't be that far apart.
Mm-hmm.
So always get your rankings ready ahead of time. Separate them into tiers by position. And you can go by tiers in the overall as well if you want. But frankly, I throw away the overall after like the second or third round anyways and just go by position. And I just use the overall as like sort of a guide as to who's most likely to be taken next.
Well, the overall is another indicator of tiers. It's just one that maybe you didn't make up yourself.
That's very true.
But yeah, I would encourage everyone out there to, when you're using your rankings, please create specific positional sheets as opposed to just going off one overall. And I think that's what Jason's talking about too.
Right.
Because you don't want to be stuck in that situation where you're the guy that drafts the first kicker because he popped up on your sheet as 164. And he's like, well, I have all my wide receivers filled out. I guess it's time for me to select the kicker,
Right. You pick your defense in the 10th round because you filled all the other positions.
Well, look, if you're doing a good job in drafting in any league, then you're not taking Justin Tucker. Because Justin Tucker is selected by the players that do not do a good job.
Just like the other positions, the difference between the kickers, the volatility in kickers is ridiculous because the people who end up the best or in the top 5 are often like the 20th kicker off the board, which means they weren't drafted at all.
Tucker has been very good, but you know what I mean.
You get a Tucker who will be top 5 every year, but he's not going to be number 1 every year. He might be 5 and 4 and 6.
Yeah, it's the value over replacement player where like you could have gotten that 5th wide receiver, but instead you get Justin Tucker. Later in the year when 2 wide receivers are out and you have nobody to pick up, you have to play someone who's not good, who's not going to score you any points. And yes, you might get that extra 4 points from Tucker, but your wide receiver is going to score 2. So
all right, well, I think we're kind of going in circles now. So let's take this in for a landing. If you guys have any questions about your drafts, make sure to go ahead and reach out to us or to join us during our next live podcast, which will be on September 1st at 9 p.m. We will have the chat room going at that time so that you can ask us questions live. You can follow along with the podcast live. Before then, you can always tweet us at drinkfive. You can follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/drinkfive, I assume. You can follow us on Instagram at drinkfive and ask us any questions. You can email Dave and I, dave@drinkfive.com. or jason@drinkfive.com.
Most of your information is right, but just go to drinkfive.com and all that stuff will be there for you.
If you find things that say Drink 5, then it's going to be us. So it'll get to us. You can ask us all the fantasy questions you want. You can ask us about beer, about life, the universe, and everything.
There you go.
All right. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Good night.
2 weeks.